من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah. In this session, we come together to celebrate knowledge, share ideas, and honor the work and insights of remarkable individuals who continue to shape through leadership in our country. Ladies and gentlemen, to officially commence our program and extend a warm welcome to our esteemed guest, it is my honor to invite on the stage Mr. Ahmed Ejaz Khan, Executive Director of ICM Pakistan, to welcome them. So please join us.
Assalamu alaikum, dear participants, and good afternoon, Mr. Shah. So it's indeed my pleasure to welcome my distinguished guest for today's thoughtful session on very pertinent topic of sustainability. And we are fortunate enough to have someone with us who is not only a mere theoretical knowledge person, but he is a practitioner in sustainability. And just downstairs, we were discussing that he's here on a quite comprehensive agenda when it comes to sustainability, ESG. And not only he will be participating few same sessions in academia and with the students, but he would be doing something good with the thought leaders of this country. So we're looking forward, and thank you very much for your extensive journey here. When it comes to the mutual relation between ACCA and ICMA, we have a very good cordial relation, and we enjoy a former relation since March 2020. When we tied our knots in that SPA exclusively, we were the only beneficiary on global basis from ACCA through that SPA. We are launching quite a good productive things for the students, for the members, and overall for the society as well. Out of this, that one MPA program is one thing that learning pathway is provided to our fellow members that they can join ACCA by only qualifying in one paper, and on reciprocal basis, we offer the same thing to our FCCAs. So this is the thing which we are looking for, that with this synergy, we will be collaborating not only in Pakistan, but as we are expanding our this mutual coordination relation globally, that we are conducting our exam outside Pakistan as well. Primarily last year, we conducted that exam in UK, and now for this year, we are eyeing for UAE as well to include in that exam centers list. So thank you very much for all the extended efforts from the ACCA Pakistan team on this base, and just representing ICMA Pakistan on ACCA Global in a befitting manner. Thank you very much for that. Sustainability and its reporting is the new emerging era for the professional accountants. And most of you, as you are on the final levels of ICMA and pursuing your careers, or potentially pursuing in a couple of years' time, that you certainly have to be there on the ham of affairs when it comes to ESG understanding. And that was not only a nice to have thing, but the things are becoming now mandatory. And this knowledge is a must for a professional accountant to steership for a good leadership in its role of CFO, COO, or CEO by that meaning. So thank you very much for this presence here, and we're looking forward for a very good 1 hour session with a learned speaker. Once again, thank you, Shah, and we hope that soon after this, we'll have good speakers from ACCA as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. You also surrounded Rajasthan, giving the welcome note to the distinguished guests. So, ladies and gentlemen, today we are diving deep into one of the most pressing themes in the business governance and impact sustainability, not just how it's reported, but how it is evolving in complex global challenges. To guide us through this vital discussion, it is my honor to introduce about our distinguished speaker, Mr. Sharad Martin. Mr. Sharad Martin is a senior policy and insight consultant for ACCA in Asia Pacific region, where he focuses on raising the Asian voice on policy making and thought leadership. He also serves on the board of trustees of Shift Project Limited, a leading center of expertise on the UN guidelines, principles on the business and human rights, and WWF Malaysia, which works to sustain the natural world for the benefits of people and wildlife. Mr. Sharad believes strongly in the need for the business to rebalance its priorities and put people, profit, and planet on par with each other. Mr. Sharad is a fellow of Association of Certified Chartered Accountants and an alumni of University of Oxford SAT Business School, where he completed a postgraduate diploma in financial strategy. Please welcome our distinguished speaker, Mr. Sharad Martin.
Good afternoon. Firstly, thank you, Nisa, for such a warm introduction. I just want to check whether you can hear me at the back. Very good. So I was going to thank the Executive Director, Mr. Amar Ijaz, but he's just stepped out of the door. But firstly, it is a privilege and an honor to come to ICMA and to speak to you about this subject, which I think is front and center of Pakistan and in fact for many other places in the world, including the places that I am from. So a little bit about me, which I know Nisa has already introduced me. How do I move this way? Okay, thank you. Yeah. As you can tell, I'm a person from the Gen X, which means I'm not good with technology. Thank God we have support. Well, firstly, sometimes after working for so long, I'm no longer sure of what my identity is. But one thing I am sure is I am a father of two, which places on me a certain responsibility for the world I leave behind, for them and for their children. Nisa has already spoken to you about all the boring stuff that is me, so I won't bother repeating it. What I want to do with you today is to speak about a few things. Firstly, around some of the positive developments that we are seeing in Asia around sustainability reporting. But I also want to go beyond reporting to understand why we should be doing reporting. Because typically as accountants, we take reporting and we make it like the most important thing in the world, like financial reporting. But I think it's time that we understand why we do financial reporting, why we do sustainability reporting. At the same time, I need to share with you, it's a responsibility to also share with you that developments in other parts of the world are not as positive. And why is that relevant? Because again, having been an accountant for 3 decades now, we are used to looking for leading practices and best practices and all kinds of examples from other places. I'm not sure if those other places exist. And we need to start from scratch almost together. So I think you know where you are in Pakistan. I'm not here to tell you what you already know, right? I think the SECP has announced directives about the full adoption of IFRS S1 and S2, and it's already started because it's We are past July and it's already started. It's on a phased approach depending on the size of the companies. But what is interesting is that assurance over these reports and disclosures will happen next year, right? I want to give you an example. And before that, there are a number of policies. This is not what I would describe as suddenly you've got sustainability reporting in Pakistan. The government and the public policy space has been developing a whole lot of policies relating to climate, relating to nature, relating to even to the social side around these things. And it goes down to green bonds and all of these areas. So it should not be surprising to accountants that now we've got sustainability reporting standards. But yesterday, again, we had the privilege of speaking with a major organization in Pakistan, who I will not name. And I asked them, how long have you started preparing for IFRS S1 and S2? And the answer was, we've just started. And this is common, even from where I come from in Asia Pacific region, it's very common. But it's not a good enough answer. If you know that these policies are coming, if you know that ISSB has been formed 2 years ago, to say that your state of preparedness is just started, who are we accountable to? And it's no longer just our organizations. It's also the wider ecosystems and society. And so we must be mindful of that as accountants. There's just about only one profession in the world where our code of ethics talks about public interest. So I know the lawyers and the doctors will disagree with me that they also have a code of ethics. But their code of ethics is about the people that they serve. For accountants, the public interest role is higher than your organization. It's higher than the clients that you serve. And I want you to remember this because all that we do is about preparing quality disclosures that serve the public interest, that serve the ecosystem. This is a little bit about the work that Asad, Taimo, and the whole team here does around sustainability. It has been a long engagement with various regulators. We've done a recent research with PBC, the Pakistan Business Council, and you can find a link to that report here. So our engagements include with board level engagements to help them understand that sustainability, what is it about, that it's coming, that these rules and regulations are all coming and you've got to prepare. So I won't spend too much time on this, except to demonstrate that this is not something that new, and it's now come to a whole new level. Now the clicker is not working. Okay. Now, you know where Pakistan is. Let me tell you from the last part of the world where I'm from, which is ASEAN. So you may have seen it in the slides, but I'm Malaysian. And so we recently launched a report on the sustainability reporting developments in ASEAN. There are 10 countries in ASEAN: Malaysia, Singapore, Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, a lot of these countries. Now, what is interesting is that if you count it by GDP, 85% of the countries in ASEAN have decided to go for IFRS S1 and S2, right? Now, again, before S1 and S2, there were other frameworks around like GRI. After that, TCFD. But now the regulators have decided very firmly that it's going to be IFRS S1 and S2, and it is mandatory, whereas GRI was optional. And why do you think the regulators want to do this? So that accountants have jobs? No. It's because as an economy, on the positive side, we'll be the 4th largest as a region by 2030. Already we have the 3rd largest labor force. That's the positive. We also have young, dynamic people just like. But the not so positive is that we could lose up to 35% of our GDP to climate risks. Pakistan is tremendously vulnerable. Don't want to be disrespectful considering how the floods have affected you. And I think in the last 10 years, there have been 3 or 4. But in our region, I think we've got Indonesia and Philippines and Myanmar, which are higher than Pakistan on the climate risk index. That's how bad it is. So we do not need to be told about how serious this issue is. We know. And that's why we are moving. And this part will be important as I explain where EU and US is in a minute. But let me tell you in Malaysia. So you can compare this in your head with Pakistan. Oh, obviously you cannot read this from the back. I don't think you can even read this from the front. But for whatever reason, the slide is coming out very blurred. Anyway, we are also doing S1 and S2 in 2025, but with a lot of carve-outs. Firstly, we are not going to apply S1 for all other categories except climate. So we're only going to start with climate. All the other categories will happen only in the year 2027. In Pakistan, that's already going to be in this year. That's a difference. In Singapore, they started out with a framework and a roadmap. And if you can see, at least this bit is clear. The ones on the gray, get this to go. This. You maybe move it down. The original timeline was for 2025. For the major groups, that still remains the same. But when it comes to scope 3 emissions, they are now making it voluntary. When it comes to assurance, they have moved from 2027 to 2029. Now, let me remind you that this is Singapore. That's the translation. In Singapore, which is a financial center with a lot of international financial flows. And yet they have taken a decision that limited assurance will be pushed back by 2 years. And in Pakistan, when is it happening? When is assurance happening for your sustainability reports? Okay, this is going to come out in your exam question, so you better know. Just kidding, I have no idea what's coming out in the exam question. But it's next year. You only have 1 year of reporting, and next year you have to start assurance. So that's where you are in Pakistan compared to what's happening in ASEAN. You can't ignore China. China is a major trading partner, I think, with Pakistan, but also with ASEAN. And despite what you might read in the news about how China in the English media is seen to be the problem when it comes to carbon emissions and destroying nature, when it comes to S1 and S2, they are also moving very, very firmly. The stock exchange has decided to adopt S1 and S2. So you're going to see a lot more things. Now, if Malaysia and Singapore are trying to reduce what we need to report, and Pakistan is going with the full standard of S1 and S2, in China, they're adding on things to it. So you might need to look at China. What are they adding on? A few areas, like for them, the Chinese characteristics that they call it, which is rural revitalization, anti-corruption, and also the double materiality. So it's not the financial impact to your organization, but also how the organization impacts upon nature. So let me speak a little bit about the challenges of sustainability reporting. Because one of the things that can happen, I'm not saying it will happen, but one of the things that can happen, and therefore as accountants, we must be careful to ensure that it doesn't happen, is that the financial reporting and the sustainability reporting are not connected. And we need to ensure that it is connected. For example, if you're talking about climate risks and flood risks, and your business is in an area where these floods happen, and you do not have any liabilities or impairment reviews of your assets, then there is a disconnect. So as you prepare, you get involved in sustainability reporting disclosures, you must ensure that what is reflected in the financial reporting is connected with sustainability reporting. The second issue is around how fragmented the world of sustainability reporting is. Some of the organizations in Pakistan have already started with GRI and a whole bunch of other things. So having now ISSB, a lot of them are confused. How do I move from GRI to ISSB? And there are now guidance and transition guidance around this globally as well as by certain markets. I think Malaysia is preparing one. So this area is causing issues and we need to recognize it. It is going to cause problems in the reporting burden and as well as how we compare information across markets. And the third thing I think is very, very important. Because in the EU, they have decided to come up with their own reporting, not ISSB. And they came up with 12 standards, not 2. And so if you imagine Pakistan or companies in Malaysia or Singapore, which are selling to Europe, we have to report under ISSB, and then we may have to report under ESRS. This is not a choice, but it's not a fair outcome because in financial reporting, there's only one global standard. So why is it in sustainability reporting, there's more than? So these are the kinds of conversations and the policy dialogues that need to happen, not just with Pakistan and Europe, but also amongst ASEAN countries with Europe to say we cannot have the burden of reporting greater in countries like ours. Now, in one of the reports that I just did, we used the opportunity to talk about the fact that places like ASEAN, and in fact, even in Pakistan, we do not have a seat at the table of policy making. What I mean by that? That means in the ISSB board, there's no one from ASEAN. A 670 million region, 4th largest economy, 3rd largest labor force, sustainability issues which will wreck our economies, and we are not represented in ISSB. I will then go further and talk about World Bank, IMF, a whole bunch of other places, and that voice is not heard. Now, we can't just sit idly about this. We need to make our concerns heard. And I say this for ASEAN, but I'm also saying it might apply to you in Pakistan. And this is where organizations such as yourselves, working with regulators, may need to have the conversations and to push back hard. That this is time for us also to be heard. How do you ensure the voice of emerging economies is heard when you are coming up with new standards? And there are new standards. So this is an open point that you may need to think about further, but understand that people like ACCA will back you because it's in our report. It's a public report, and we have said this. And so far, no one has questioned this. Right? So I would urge you to look at it. Some examples of capacity building programs that you could consider. Different examples I wanted to show you. Capacity building, I'm sure you're doing, but the interoperability model between GRI and IFRS is something that Malaysia's. Illustrative sustainability reports are being produced on the plantation sector because it matters to Malaysia, which is agriculture. The property and construction sector because it's a big thing in Malaysia as well. And we also have guides. So, and I think, even here we are working with the ICG and SCCP to help boards navigate this whole issue. Singapore is going a little bit different. They're giving grants to companies which have to prepare these disclosures in the first year only. And the amounts are not small. They are more than 100,000, depending on the size of the company in the first year of adoption. Why? Because they know you have to hire valuers sometimes. You have to get experts and consultants in sometimes. So they're putting money in. And they've got a whole lot of digital ideas also around supporting companies with this. One of it is around the emissions factor registry, because, for example, if you're in agriculture or you're in different areas, the amount of emissions that you give out is probably going to be similar whether you are producing, cotton in this location or another location, right? So the idea of a register factory like this, a factors registry, is to take this data and share it so that the effort is not repeated, especially when it comes to smaller companies. Now, let me talk about one of my favorite places, which is the European Union. So in the European Union, as I said, they were the first ones to come up with 12 standards. And at that time, the rest of the world were in two worlds. One which says, wow, this is amazing. Come up with 12 standards, and they were pretty good standards. And then we said, well, the rest of us are adopting ISSB. How does this match up? How do you square this too? And of course, as I mentioned, you'll have to do both. But guess what happened? In the EU, they decided to stop because they were worried about the administrative burden on the companies. And this is what most of us in Asia were telling them. To say, well, there's a lot of administrative burden on our companies. Mind you, we are in emerging market context. Our people and capabilities of technology, all of that need to be improved. We're not ready. But Europe went ahead anyway. Now they are concerned because of the backlash from their own people to say that this is too much. So what they have done is they have stopped the clock on the requirements of things like CSRD and CSDDD, which is the due diligence directive, which is very HR related. And I'll come to that. So you need to be aware of this because what I mentioned earlier, that if the idea is you're going to look for reports in Europe that have all of these standards and you can borrow from them, well, my point is I'm not sure you're going to get it. Maybe in 2 years or 3 years you might get it, but for now, the clock has been stopped. Now, this brings us to a very, very important part. I know you're already grappling with S1 and S2. You cannot think of anything else. You don't even understand what is S1, S2, right? So many things to unpack. But the world is not going to wait. Similarly, the nature issues that we are faced with is not going to stop the clock like EU because the accountancy profession is not ready. Nature's issues, the glaciers will still melt whether we know S1 or S2. So what do you think ISSB is working on next? There are two areas. One is nature. We call them the biodiversity, ecosystems, and ecosystem services. Now, just be mindful that when I speak of ecosystems, sometimes I mean the business ecosystem. But in the ISSB standard, they are using it in relation to biodiversity. Therefore, it means nature's ecosystems. And what are these nature ecosystems, such as water and all of these, biodiversity elements that are there, marshlands, of how people's lives have been affected. What is the value of the global GDP? About 100 trillion. So water contributes more than half to the global GDP. And yet we don't understand what causes water to increase its value to our economies and societies, and what causes water to lower that, to degrade that. As accountants, now I'm telling you, you need to understand. So I'm not sure in Pakistan what is the mode of someone picking up accountancy. Is it a science student or an art student? Could be both. Could be both. So in Malaysia, generally, it's not the science students who take up accountancy, it's the art students. And I tell them, this is now your wake-up call. You ran away from science to do accountancy. Now you must learn science again. Because there's no way you can understand nature and climate if you don't understand a little bit of science. And if you don't understand, it's your job to find out, right? So things like hydrological cycles, what causes it to work, what causes it to be in disrepair, now you have to know, because your businesses may be in locations which will be affected by it. This often raises a very delicate problem amongst businesses. Whose problem is it? Because the business will only think about its own corporate entity and the boundaries in which it operates. And then they will say, well, this is the government's problem. They have to be fixing these things, right? You can see from the nods of the head. But when the government is not fixing the issue, then whose problem is it? So I think sometimes it's about us rethinking how we frame the problem. When we are saying the problem is on the other side, we're not going to address this problem. And yet I think of businesses who have set up foundations and trust and who have given back to society. So there is already a business model for dealing with things outside of your organization's scope and bound. We now need to think about how we use that. So Pakistan is predicted to reach absolute water scarcity by 2025. There are basically three categories: no stress, water stress, four, water scarcity and absolute water scarcity. And it goes about the amount of water that you have per capita, which I think you understand in Pakistan. One of the reasons why you're going this way, or the two, is your population has increased. And the other thing is, you'll see in the last bullet point that only 9% of annual river flows are stored. I'm sorry if this sounds a little critical, but in any business, if you lose your input by 90%, it's not a good business model. If you take that thinking now to water, then it is a responsibility to store the water. And of course, come back to the question now, whose responsibility is it? But I think that's a flawed question. You keep asking that question and we'll never move. I think you know all of these things. The sectoral impact is all of that. So I am very concerned of this particular issue, not just in Pakistan, but globally. As an accountant, therefore, I devote a lot of my time to talking to experts around this subject of water, because I know nothing about it. So I speak to the people. Do they exist? Absolutely. Do they exist in Pakistan? Absolutely. So these are things for you to think about. So in Pakistan, the government has just announced a national AI policy, which is very important. There's a hope that it will create a lot of jobs. You'll have a lot of AI professionals. This morning, we were with a very exciting university where they are looking to develop this whole space. bridging finance and IT skills, and this is going to be fantastic. So I'm not negative about AI, but I am concerned about AI because there is a tremendous impact from nature, from AI. Let me just share some statistics. So if you look at China's data centers compared with Google, the amount of water that China uses is equivalent to 520,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. And that's more than almost 2 times one of their major cities, which has 26 million people, kind of water usage is tremendous. Now, how many of you all used ChatGPT? Only, why only hands in front? People at the back don't use? Okay. So if you use ChatGPT versus Google search, you can see the difference in the amount of water that is being used. Yesterday, very interestingly, one of my colleagues, Taimo, decided to ask ChatGPT, how much water do you use from your data centers? And he said nothing, next to nothing. But this is a work and research done by an institute called the China Water Research Institute. So I'm not sure who I'll believe. In fact, actually, I know who I will believe. I leave it to you who you want to believe. Again, one search by one person, one bottle of water. How many ChatGPT users are there now? How many ChatGPT users in the world do you think there are now? More than 100 million for sure. Just from you already, I don't know, looks like 20%. There's a lot of people who use ChatGPT. So I'm going to leave you with some thoughts around if tomorrow you are in an organization and that organization is investing in AI, fine. But you need to ask some questions at the board level, at the senior management level, and make sure they know. So your job as a CFO one day is not that you know everything, but you get to ask hard questions. And if they don't pass your questions, you don't pass them. They don't get money, right? So the CFO is in such an incredible position. So how will the AI strategy affect water usage? Where, in which location? How will it replenish what it drains from the earth? And will it create other social problems? There's a number of questions that I want to leave you with for you to think about. As I leave this subject, I want to repeat what I just said, that it is really illogical for us to continue to think that the problem is not ours. I understand why we do that, but it's no longer going to work. And we need to think differently about how we address this issue. Because when you prepare a balance sheet, when you prepare an income statement, you go by a specific entity, right? It's a corporate entity. But that corporate entity is what draws the boundary and it says, this is not my problem. But is that good enough? So I know I'm asking bigger questions and sustainability reporting, but that's what the profession has to deal with. Now, it is possible to get this right. I'm going to explain to you how in China there's a city called Wuchou, which in the 1990s to 2000s were producing batteries. And as they were producing batteries in China's dark old days, lead was being leached into the soil, the lakes were being destroyed, all of that. Then much later in 2017, the government realized how bad things were. And they started this whole green financial reform. And that really took off. A number of cities tried this, but Huzhou seems to be the one city that has done it well. Now, what they did was it wasn't based on ideology, it wasn't based on capitalism, it wasn't based on any of these things. It was just about institutional design. And they've got a library that connects people who want the money with the bankers who are willing to give the money. And they do this with precision. The incentives are given with precision. So a bank that lends to green projects gets subsidized. Sounds unthinkable, but they get subsidized. Look at the number of green products they have now and the total loans, 41 billion. That's a lot of money. I think my colleague Asad has reminded me that I think in Pakistan, your water ecosystems, the amount that is lost is equivalent to about 46 billion. And this is the amount of loans one city is giving out in China to address this. Now, what's the proof? Have they turned it around? Firstly, they produce EV components today. 99% of the material is recycled. The cement plants are electrified. They don't use fossil fuels. And the lake is now a place of ecotourism. In terms of tackling greenwashing, again, they use technology, and more than 22,000 businesses have ESG ratings, where their environmental claims are justified and validated. If you have been to China, and I hope one day you go to China, you will understand how technology is everywhere. Like you can't speed on a road. By the time you reach home, you'll get a speeding ticket. That's how fast it is. And that's how serious it is. Now, I have a little interesting question that I want to ask you. That is, what is your relationship with nature? And I'm going to borrow something from a book that I read. And this book is written by a Cambridge professor. He's not an ecologist, he's not an environmentalist, but he's written this book. I want to ask you this question. And the question is a river alive? I can see you nodding your head. I can see you nodding your head. Is a river alive? Anyone want to give me a view, an answer to share? The river has many lives inside it. Okay. I keep going. Let someone else. See? 100% is alive right there. Anyone else? No? A friend from Dubai. Yeah. Anyway, there's no right and wrong one. This is just me being a few explanation. Think of this question. The river alive. What do you think that is? When is the least alive of it? Someone from the back. Only hears the voices of the future. The lens of the future. I must tell you, very patient. I can stand here the whole day until somebody speaks. We were alive inside when the upline changed after the passage of after a couple of days. So, what do you mean? How is the name alive after? How is we were alive inside of the human, especially in Pakistan, in Pakistani people, where, for example, my goal is this, and very next day, when challenging days come, so my plan is changing. So how it is possible for people alive in a human? In the human. Okay. Just want to be clear, the question is about people alive. What if it's inside of a person? I don't mean that. Okay. Depends on the person. But is a river. Can I give you? Can I come and walk up here and give you the mic? I need to hear from the future generation, otherwise I'm not dealing. Stay here the whole day. This is your future, it's not mine. Is the river alive?
A river can perform a living system like in the shape, it moves in the shapes of landscapes.
Amazing answer. So at least I have future, I have hope for the future of Pakistan. 1%, but it's enough. Now it's after the river is flowing, the dam is not here to stop it.
Yes, rivers are definitely moving continuously, so stand at one place, keep moving forward.
Hope for the future. Anyone who believes the river is not alive? Like me. Like me. Anyone who believes the river is not alive? No? You are all accountants? And you believe the river is alive? Yes. Okay. So then my next question is, if it is alive, as you say it is alive, not me, then how do you make business decisions in your business way of working? You said it's alive, not me. Right? And you are teaching students where be the future leaders in Pakistan. And the future leaders have just spoken with you, think it's alive. Then you must go into your boardrooms, into your management meetings. If something is affecting water, if you think it's alive, then you must carry it into the decision making, right? Is that happening today? I can tell you this is not a Pakistan. It's the world over. Now, what is interesting is now I know I'm speaking to accountants, but the legal profession is moving because they are recognizing the rights of nature. But actually, we are not too far. Because if you say a river is alive, then it means it must have rights. One follows the other, it's not disconnected. So I'm told we only got 5 minutes. Now, very quickly, I won't have time to get into the details, but places like Ecuador and New Zealand are granting rivers and other forms of nature the rights, legal rights. And also in New Zealand, what's called legal person. A corporate entity is a legal person, and in New Zealand, a particular river is also a legal. So if the profession, the finance and accounting profession does not move, we will lose credibility. So let me give you a quote, which I hope will resonate with you, especially in your local context. Which is, if you listen to the cries of the poor, as you should, then they are the cries of nature. Nature kind of uses people to express its own cries. It sounds, I know, a bit weird coming from an accountant, but it is true. Now the question is, in your work, when you go out into the working world, and some of you are already working, how are you bringing this conversation? So do me a favor, if you're working, when you go back into your meetings in organization, just ask them one question. Is a river? Then you know how to have the conversation. So there are also a lot of things happening in human rights, which is the next standard that is being worked on. I won't be spending too much time on this, but understand that there's a lot of guidance on this issue from if your business is not doing anything on climate change, you're creating a human rights issue. And you take mitigating actions, you're also creating a human rights issue for certain people, advantaging certain people, disadvantaging. So this issue is very complex. Human rights is going to be front and center of everything that you do. Now, some companies are doing this thing called a just transition. Even then, there will be human rights issues. What we need to be careful about is to extend the lens of who are we talking about. It's not just poor communities, but also children, elderly and disabled, workers, women. There's a whole lot of categories that we must include in our scope of reporting. Now, the living wage is a subject in which I did a piece of research about. Again, it is a matter of human rights that we should, as businesses, pay workers what they need for a decent standard of living. I'm going to leave this research with you, the links, so that you can follow it. I realize I'm running out of time, so I'll move on to the last area, which is climate finance. Now, climate finance is one of the positive offshoots because it's growing. Now, in the last 5 years, this investment has been driven by the private sector, but the not so good news is 80% of climate finance is sourced domestically. And we were just talking about this earlier, because any help and support that we think is going to come from the global north, we have to be careful about such assumptions. And we have to raise money that is needed locally. So understand that this is happening, it's positive, but we will have to solve our own problems. The investment gap is closing. So by 2030, we should have close to 6 trillion being invested in climate finance around it. The last thing I would touch on is the idea of Tayyib finance. And Tayyib finance is under the umbrella of Sharia finance, Islamic finance, but it's slightly different. Because in the typical Sharia finance convention, you will only look to negatively screen out certain things. Gambling, prostitution, all of that. If business is doing it, you don't get money. But Tayyib finance is going to go further and say, what is your business doing? Is it providing a fundamental value to society? And our Prime Minister in Malaysia is going very gung-ho on this idea. So it's like it's finance, Islamic finance for sustainability, which is much stronger than Sharia finance currently. So there again, there's a report, a scholars review that is done by INSEAF. The local universities I met today are also people who are working with INSEAF, and you can read about that. This is one organization called the Global Ethical Finance Institute, which is willing to put money into this areas. 500 billion is not small. And these are maybe conversations to be had in Pakistan around how you would like to get involved in the space of Tayyib finance. But it's very promising, and let's see where it goes. Finally, I'm going to close with a quote from our CEO, Helen Brand, because this problem seems too big. But if we keep thinking that way, we're not going to move. So we need to start somewhere, and at least starting is good. So with that, I'm going to end the presentation and take any questions from the audience. I can see people want to ask, but are too shy to ask. Any questions? If not, do you have a question? Yeah, he's warming them up. It's not. I purposely said that, trying to see whether I could convince someone to follow me into the debt trap, but no one did. They're all smart. So no. So one thing I would ask, I told you to go out into your workplace and ask this question. The second thing I'd like you to do is yourself go out to nature and tell me what you feel. It might be good, it might not be good. It'll be a reflection of the state of that nature. But if as accountants we don't connect with nature, that which feeds our bread basket, then we've got nothing. We don't know how to make business decisions. So maybe think about that. No questions. I'll invite Asa to say a few things.
Assalamualaikum. We just trying to get live. Among you guys, what is the level of what is the level within ICMA concept? Anybody within professional level? Questioning acting at the strategic. The strategic level. All are domain of business beyond this. Exactly opposite. Anybody who just started ICMA, they could raise their hand. Professional level students. Brilliant. See the reason, if I have to ask, why do you talking about sustainability? Why? Any answer? Any language? और उसकी रिपोर्टिंग के बारे में क्यों बात करें? So future stabilization is one point. The other, from this group, any volunteer, then people will be relying on their opinion. You have to express an opinion for them to rely on it. You are the future leadership within finance, within organization. So the purpose of this joint venture with ICMA and which other groups come all the way from Malaysia, not to ICMA, but to Pakistan, or other individuals, is to bring that perspective, that idea. Because going forward, this is what you and your peers, your team members will be talking about. मुझे ये बताइएगा, if I were to ask, if the सैलाब या flood time, उसका क्या impact है sustainability reporting? ये क्या नहीं है reporting? सैलाब आते तो business को भी नुकसान में मुश्किल पेश आती, उन्होंने क्या खत्म हो जाए? ठीक है, वो तब है अगर आपका लेट से अब कभी भी आपको बनाया हो business, कभी भी ये हो जाए, क्या तरीके से and planning. As an output, you can help your organization's plan. This is one. All the impact. Raw material. Import, supply chain. If you say raw material, factory impact. If you don't have a factory, let's say if you are in financial services, banks, there's nothing. Transaction deals, so the very purpose of this is to, because you are new or let's say fresh into the profession, accountants or accountants are rolled up बढ़ता गया, फिर accountants और higher levels. We need to know about point जो भी shared by him, that if I am going to be an engineer or a science person or a doctor, whatever is passion that we are undertaking, it's back to back. दुनिया में कोई ऐसे business जहाँ पे accountant की जरूरत ना हो. Being as good यही चीज बहुत क्योंकि हमारे स्टैंडर्ड लाइन S1 S2 तो उसने सस्टेनेबिलिटी की बात की तो की जरूरत ऐसी क्यों पड़ गई कि हमको शुरू से देखते आ रहे हैं कि भाई हमारा जो बिजनेस रहेगा उस कॉन्सेप्ट के मौसम नहीं होगा आपके सवाल है कि why do we need sustainability? आप अगर आप मुझे कितना तो गोइंग कंसर्न सबसे जाएंगे नहीं है वो हाथ खड़ा मैं भी खड़ा कर मुझे कॉल ठीक है कॉल के मैं तो मुझे पता है देखिए तो देखिए गोइंग कंसर्न को मुश्किल होता है अगर हमें ये मालूम था हम ये इम्पोर्टेंट थी and the adoption of which why do we need sustainability? Sustainability आपको से S1 और S2 I think probably the ideas firstly just familiarize ourselves with the concept of sustainability. Going concern sustainability में what is the impact the majority conversation that happens with Sharad you would have asked we have to talk about balance sheet. We haven't talked about assets. We are not talking about income. We are not talking about activity. सारी बातें हैं which is not financial nature related. So can you get the name? One concern was focusing on consumption based on financial factors, financial variables. Now we are talking about nature variables that have that we translated into financial impact. For simple reason, we said that the business will stop. Completely parcel obviously top 28, 29 or 30 जो होने जाने उसका पता है तो आपका पता है और एक और और एक हेलमेट पहन के चलान काटते हैं तो एक घंटा ऑफ बैंक बट ऑफ इज द कॉन्फिडेंस ऑफ बॉडी द लोग सारे इफेक्टिव के आपके मिलियन मिशन की बात हमें नहीं पता कि 20 साल के बाद जितना पानी अभी पहली दफा शहरों का रिस्क हुआ फर्स्ट टाइम हम हमेशा देखते हैं कि बिहार के तालाब अभी भूटान को बचाने की खाना बंद कर दिया ताकि खाना बंद खाना लाहौर के the risk is increasing. So all this will eventually get translated into engines of financial let's say institution of finance. कंपनियों को सोचना होगा हम सब कुछ नहीं कर रहे हमारे काम भी करके चले जाए हमारे बच्चे होते हैं ये अभी जनरेशन बट इट्स अ रियलिटी बात अभी आगे से व्यावसायिक नीचे बात आप जो है पाकिस्तान में दुनिया के सबसे कम देश क्यों इधर पाकिस्तान के सबसे कम देश क्यों why do we have the lowest glacier level in Pakistan? So you can first ask me that whether I believe that Pakistan has the lowest glacier presence or not. The fact is that outside Africa and Pakistan has one of the largest glacier presence. Pakistan में आपको मिलता है कि जितना लैंड जो है वो फॉरेस्टेड है अक्सर में जंगलात में कितने फीसद है हमारे देश में 25%, 50%. कराची को देखने का मतलब 5% जब पाकिस्तान इंडिपेंडेंट पाकिस्तान फॉर्म हुआ तो तब कितना अभी इट्स नॉट 4.5 at independence we were 6%. 1.4% का वर्क पानी तो है हमारे पास बस पानी और ग्लेशियर फॉर्म तो ये कुछ कॉन्वर्सेशन के साथ If you want it, because here, how sustainability is too fast, and this is benefit. How क्या कहते हैं sustainability Superman money. That's a loan, but such a big opportunity. Whether you are an auditor, whether you are a person who is managing finance, whether you are a person who is creating a business, whether you are helping create products, whether you are dealing with consumers, आप ये बताएंगे आप एक प्रोडक्ट में रिसर्च एक प्रोडक्ट जिसमें लिखा हुआ है कि मैं जुलाब का काम करता हूँ अभी बनाया नहीं होता वर्सेस भी एक कंपनी के गेम कर रही एक से आप इससे उसका प्रोडक्ट दे रहे जो ये गेम कर रहा है कि वो जैसे भी प्रोडक्ट so consumer की preference भी बढ़ रही है past few years में I think the big round of applause for yourself for being patient. I think even bigger round of applause for being more patient. Why have I become a professional? Why have I spent so much time, energy, and effort into becoming a professional company where the rate of conversion is low? Or the equal have other certainty of why? Because you can't find professionals are the biggest profession who get asked very, very hard. Which is the reason why big companies will take decisions. आपको ट्रस्ट क्रिएट करते हैं इसलिए कि हम फॉर एग्जांपल हमारे नाम के साथ ट्रस्ट करते हैं डायरेक्ट लाइक फेलो मेंबर पर्सनली और एसोसिएट मेंबर पर्सनली और पीसीसी और एफसीसी bring that confidence that they have got this that they bring this credibility only if you talk to them. So thank you once again, thank you very much. Ourselves, you and me, I am experiencing leadership for giving us this opportunity. I wish you all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And I would like to thank Mr. Sheriff Martin. That, sir, thank you very much for conducting a very insightful session today on sustainability reporting. And I'm very thankful to Mr. Asad Hamid Khan Sahab, and he is the head of ACCA Pakistan, sir, to connect the audience to the trainer. Thank you very much. So now it is the time to present Shield to our honorable distinguished guest speaker. I would like to invite Executive Director of ICM Pakistan, Mr. Amir Jas Khan, on the stage. So please join us. And I would like to invite Mr. Sheriff Martin. Please, sir, join the stage to receive your shield. Thank you very much, sir. And I would like to invite Mr. Asad Hamid Khan, head of the SCCA Pakistan. Please, sir, join the stage. Thank you so much, sir. Today's session would definitely help us to explore both the challenges and the opportunities of navigating sustainability in the dynamic world. So I would like to invite now Mr. Asad Hamid Khan Sahab to receive souvenirs from Mr. Amir Ijaz Khan, Executive Director of ICM Pakistan. So thank you very much for a wonderful and nice collaboration with the ICM Pakistan for this wonderful session. Thank you very much, sir. Please, group photo, please, if you would like to join distinguished guests and the branch council members and directors, please. I would like to invite you all the dignitaries to join the stage for a group photo. Javed, please, sir, join.
Thank you.